maybe invite one of our attendees to join in via video if they're willing. So for those attendees who are listening before we start the call, go ahead and start getting your hair and makeup on, because you just might get pulled into the 6th frame tonight. So, you never know. You got to be ready. We promise to be agile and nimble and give you, real life stuff. And this is really just how it is sometimes. So, okay. Welcome. You ready? We are recording. Great. It'll edit it out. So welcome to Words of Wisdom. It's Thursday night and you know what that means. It's time to talk about things that sometimes are difficult. People always imagine that they might have done things differently if they had only known better. And it's so easy to dwell on missed opportunities, pile on the regrets, what you should have done this, you should have done that. But hold on, it's not just what you did or didn't do. It's what you felt or didn't feel, or didn't allow yourself to feel. Your emotional state is often the decider of your actions and your non-actions, and your lack of even thinking about what you should be doing. And yet we forget that. Emotions fade fast from people's memories, time moves on, and we forget things that we should remember. Sometimes, as the anger that fuels us dissipates, fear diminishes, and self-righteousness wins, the situation starts to look different, and it looks very real. And that's when you wish you could go back in time and make different decisions. But alas, what's done is done. So rather than sigh and say, if I knew then what I know now, ask yourself, what can I learn now? What can I learn now tonight on Words of Wisdom to reduce my regrets in the future and take action to make my life and the world a better place? Welcome to Words of Wisdom, Then and Now. I'm Louise Eiler, I'm your host. I am a TEDx speaker, a college professor, a licensed psychotherapist. I'm a mom, I'm a friend. And a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to connect with Tamra Simmons, who is the CEO of the TSB agency, an award-winning executive producer of Surviving R. Kelly, and also had to get in good vibes with celebrity publicist and certified transformative mediator and Yellow Rose of Texas Award recipient, Shatana Nelson. Tonight, we are pleased to bring with us as a guest speaker, Alyssa Gruber, who has 2 master's degrees and is PhD all but dissertation. That means she's almost there on the finish line. She is a psychologist, a therapist, trauma and addiction specialist, a meditation instructor, a wellness expert, a change maker, an advocate, and a writer. We are also honored and privileged to have Dr. Ish, board certified psychiatrist, author, and dating and relationship expert on Marriage Boot Camp. Later tonight, we may be joined by Candace Renee Rice. We will touch base with her later, and hopefully she'll be able to catch up. But we welcome all of you tonight to Words of Wisdom. And I think now I'm going to go right over to Tamra to open it up and kind of talk about, what's on your mind tonight, and what do you think the world needs to hear in our groundbreaking effort of bringing words of wisdom to people at home in need of good advice.
Actually going to pass it to Shatana to do that. I'm too emotional today, so I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Hello, everybody. I don't know if you're kind of seeing what's going on in the world, but we do have some things going on. If you're familiar with what's going on in Georgia with Ahmaud, he was just running through a neighborhood, and video was leaked 2 months later of his lynching, modern day lynching. It's a lot of talk about it. So often we run into this, and this is very relevant to our topic today, then and now. This is something that's been going on forever. It may look a little bit different now, however, racism is real. And in my opinion, the Black man has become an endangered species. Not just with this situation, we can even talk about Nathaniel, who sat on death row and ultimately was killed, and nobody really, politicians, I want to be careful with my words, were in place that could have changed that. So today we're coming in, I'd like to kind of start off talking about that and then get into the then and now, and I'm not really going to voice my opinion completely yet. I want someone else to, but I don't know if you're aware of what's going on in the world, but it's very valid, and it's not to just African Americans, it's not to just white people, it's not to women, it's not to men, because the truth is the only way anything can change is to unite and for people to have healthy conversations and give perspectives and say, you know what, this isn't okay. Anyone who saw that video, knows that it wasn't okay. And I'd really like to toss it to Dr. Ish to kind of get his opinion on it. One, because I know that he can give it in multiple ways. He's a black man. I don't know if he's ever been in any situation where he was like, oh, what do I do if I get pulled over? He may not feel like that. And at the same time, being someone who just knows about mental states and just life in general and having so much wisdom, I just really like to hear what he has to say about that. And then at that point, we can kind of shift over into the main topic. And when we're talking about Tamra, I want to be very clear. We're talking about a person who she's one of those people who stand on the front line for justice. We saw that with Surviving R. Kelly and things of that sort. So when she said that she was emotional, that's a person who's kind of dealing in her head. You know, people like her, they get to dealing and figuring out how they can create a change in a different way. So Dr. Ish, I'm gonna toss it over to you and let you champion this thing.
You're on, Dr. Ish. Dr. Ish, you're on mute.
Oh, am I? Hold on. Let me fix that. What about now?
You're good, thanks.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so I appreciate that, Shatana. It's one of those solemn days, right, for the Black community, for sure. Because when things like this happen, they remind us that no matter how far we've come, we're still not out of those shadows. You know, so when Shatana, you asked, you're not sure if I've ever had any experience with that. Well, I grew up poor and Black in the South, so no, I don't know anything about racism, right? It's one of those things. I had 5 sisters, 8 aunts. My oldest aunt, her name was Eugene, born late 1800s. And I can remember one of the last conversations I had with her, before she passed away. We would, and she was pointing out to me the different trees where friends of hers were hung from. And she was pointing out to me, oh, that's the swamp right there where, we saw that dead body when we were coming home from school that day. And so, this is, people like to say there are different versions of America. There's a white America, there's a Black America. Well, and to a certain extent that's true, but what there really are just multiple realities, right? And what the problem we're having is most of us don't have a shared reality, even still. So the reality for a lot of us is, yeah, we do have to think about where we're going to go and what we're going to look like when we're there and how we're going to act and who we're going to be around, because we don't feel safe in that situation. Well, that's not a lot of other people's reality, but that is the reality for a lot of Black folks. Our reality is, yeah, you know what? We do feel like we have to try twice as hard to be taken seriously just because of the history, right? There was a time where it behooved everybody in the nation to believe that, Black people weren't as smart and weren't as human and didn't feel things because slavery was the thing that boomed the economy. And so, yeah, you've got to overcome that, the thing that makes, and so the argument is, well, there was slavery in other, in other civilizations, other cultures. Why is it so different here? Well, because it's different here because Black people are the only ex-slaves who actually still have to live in the place where they were slaves. And so that's a heavy mantle that's a heavy yoke to try to take off your neck. And so when we think about Ahmaud and we think about, why it happened and, and why is it still happening, the initial thing, once we get past the shock of it and we feel the anger and the rage, because it's not just rage from this week, it's rage from last week, it's rage from last year, it's rage from that time when that thing happened. What we're really feeling underneath there is fear, right? Shatana.
Okay,
Yeah.
who's next?
We all, right? We all,
Yeah,
I have a
we all
son.
know Black men who like to jog.
I have a
We all know
9-year-old.
Black men who have to leave their homes on occasion, whether it's to go to work or to go to the gym or go to the grocery store. And every Black mother alive has had that talk with her son, how to survive a traffic stop.
Yeah, and let me say that every white mother alive who has a Black son has also had that talk.
Right.
I
Right.
have a biracial son, and he looks more Black than white. And our whole life we have been discriminated against.
Right.
From when I take him with me to early employee appointments, because I'm a single parent. He went with me everywhere. He went to work with me till he was 4 years old. Some of my coworkers would say, "How could you have a Black baby?" I mean, this is real stuff that people say to me, right? And then I take him to the doctor's office, and the doctors sometimes would say, it's so nice that you adopted that boy. I mean, that's real stuff. And my whole life, you know, I had to explain to my son, look, if you're out with your friends, you can't put your hands in your pocket. You can't wear your hoodie. You know, if you get pulled over, just get out of the car and lay on the ground and be still. Don't even move. Don't reach for your phone. Don't even pick your nose, because your life depends on your ability to remain calm, because not everyone can see the world the way that we do.
You want to know something devastating? That now that y'all said that, my son's 9, right? And it's COVID and he's been in the house, but my neighborhood is very secluded, very off. You know, we all know each other. So he wanted to go outside and ride his bike about 2 hours ago. I just got back from getting my hair braided. And I looked at my son as he got in. I live in a white neighborhood, just being honest. As my son got ready to go out and get the bike, I told him that I prefer him to just go upstairs to the game room. And I came in my room and I sat down and I thought, my son's huge. His dad's like 6'2", so my son is my height. I'm like 5'1", and my son is like 4'9". Seriously, he don't look like a 9-year-old. And I thought, I have to teach my son how to be Black. I have to teach my son all of those things, and not to take away from any other type of any other race. But my white friends aren't telling their sons what they got to do when they get pulled over. They're not telling them, like, don't go outside and get on a bike because they're safe. They're not telling their kids that. So I think the biggest issue with me is this has become a culture, and that's why it's acceptable. Because when something becomes a culture, it's accepted, regardless of if you're protesting or what you're doing. When something becomes a culture, it's something that's happening, and it's a part of something, a part of this world. And the problem has become that nobody wants to dismantle this culture because we use the word fear, but fear is very different from a Black mama than when you gun down somebody's child and you say, well, I was scared of them. So I think we have a problem because this fear thing is becoming a part of that culture of racism. And making these things acceptable. And I'm calling BS. You're not, I don't care about that anymore. It's BS. We're not doing that anymore. So when we're talking about the then of when this has been okay for so long, I don't think anybody should go out and be violent. When we become the monsters that we're facing, then we're monsters too, and we're no different. But it's about time that people start saying, you're not scared. And if you're scared, you don't need to be a police officer. And if you're scared, you don't need to live in that neighborhood. And if you couldn't call the police, then something needs to be done. And it's way bigger than just going to, like, put those 2 guys in jail. You know why it's bigger? Because for 2 months, nothing happened. So what's happening to all the cases that's not going viral? And if everybody don't start calling BS, like, you're not scared, you're racist.
Well,
I got my friends.
Yeah, and this is exactly what. Go ahead, Tamra. Sorry.
No, that's why I was saying that, like, everybody's mental is not the same. Like, you know, this is why we started this mental health. You know, I mean, now I feel like it's like a call to action, I guess, on, you know, today or whatever. But not everyone was raised the same way. Not everyone was taught, you know, how to treat Black people or white people or whatever. I feel that I don't care if you're Black, brown, white, red, or whatever. In 2020, you can deprogram yourself from being a racist person. You see what it causes. Like, you see that people are being killed. You see that for no reason, just for the color of their skin. They said that they thought that Ahmaud was a robber in the neighborhood that had been, but he was jogging and he had no weapon on him. So how is that? Why would you not call the police and say, hey, I think this is the person that's been stealing in our neighborhood? Why would you feel like you can do a citizen's arrest?
Why would you record it?
Well, there's a lot of things.
Recording, and because you guys, it was premeditated.
Well, even bigger than being premeditated, there's so many things that come into play here, and there's so many reasons why we wanted to add this to our call tonight, because there really has never been a more important time to take community action. I want you all to consider that. I think for Tamra, you live in Atlanta, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so when you look at this incident occurred.
Hi, Candace.
In a little town just south of Savannah, Georgia, in the 2 area code, I believe. And I'm a researcher and I'm a sociologist, so I study human behavior. So when I heard this, what concerned me the most was that it took more than 2 months for something to get just 3 hours away from coastal Georgia to the heart of Atlanta. And
In the
then
middle of COVID,
in the
where
middle
it
of,
is very easy for everything to get passed around. It was kept quiet in the middle of COVID.
and the other thing that's important to know is just like every state during COVID has different guidelines on when they're going to open up and when they went under quarantine, the laws in every state are the same. And whether you know it or not, every single state in the United States of America has a different wiretapping law. So for example, Georgia is a one-party state. And what that means for videotaping in Georgia means that someone who videotaped 2 total strangers is forbidden to do that. And the guy who actually took that video broke the law because neither one of those people on that camera gave verbal consent in the one-party state of Georgia. Every state has different laws. And so this is a perfect example of how we've got to really take action to unite our communities. And, you know, we've got to be able to develop a true respect and appreciation for our neighbors. We've got to learn how to operationalize our thoughts and create lasting policy change. And what's really troubling to me is if I ask everyone listening on this call and the people on Facebook Live to tell me who your state senator is, to tell me who your chief of police is, to tell me who your county controller is, and to your city and who your city authority official is, I bet you couldn't name those top 5 individuals, but I bet you know the top 5 fans in your Instagram. And that's what we've got to shift to, a culture that can get to making change, a culture that can get to having difficult conversations, and a culture that is willing to welcome everyone, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their educational attainment level, regardless of what they have to say. Because words of wisdom, like the words you're going to hear on this call tonight, are a form of nostalgia, and nostalgia is passing on what we've learned. So the real challenge here is we've got to learn something new. And so
Can I just interject one thing?
Mhm.
I think there is a patent lack of accountability in our country.
There it is.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting, Shatana, when you said it took 2 months for something to spread from rural to city, I'm thinking to myself how overrepresented the statistics are showing African-American men are for severe consequences of COVID. No one's talking about that either. So there are incredible racial
divides. The black man is the most endangered species in the country right now. So what I hear you, Louisa, but let me tell you what I'm saying. I'm saying if black people, white people, men, women, Hispanic, if everybody don't come together and fight for the black man, the endangered species, then who's next? Because the truth is, when you don't stop one injustice, then it grows others. So it's them this week in this decade, but next decade, who says it's not going to be the woman again, or who says it's not going to be the white man again? So if you're sitting at home and you're needing a reason to unite, we're uniting because that's what this country does. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what people need to do. And if you're not smart enough to do that, understand that the tables do turn. So if you're at home, a white lady, a black, a Mexican, whoever you are, if you're not going to stand up for people who are, I mean, you can't even deny it. They're either getting put on death row, they're getting sent to jail. We don't care if they get tested for COVID. And outside of that, they're getting gunned down with video evidence and they're not even going to jail. And the problem is way bigger than just race. The problem is, who are you? We're all human. We're all beings. So
Like,
it's
what
them
is the
today,
end
but who is it later on? And if everybody don't start standing up for something, then we enter into a territory where there's no integrity, there's no accountability, there's none of those things. And when those things go away, it's not just going to be them. Eventually, that's going to spread. It's going to be retaliation. It's going to be all kinds of crazy things. And then nobody is safe. So if nobody takes a stand now for the safety of them, then you are facilitating, you're a part of something that's going to happen in this earth that's going to be it's not going to be good for anybody to live here.
And when
So
you say,
I agree 100%.
that's why.
I agree 100%. I think if
Candace
one
wants to
child
talk.
is unsafe, then all children are unsafe. I really have to piggyback on that. You know, I was thinking, my grandma had her mouth muffled as an infant in Russia when there were Nazis down below looking to take her. You know, this is a cyclical thing that happens. As you said, Shatana, it is not race specific. So, Luisa, I know that as a moderator, you have some of the most key ways of tying this together. But I just want to say from a heartful place, Shatana, I agree with you 100%. Integrity and accountability are human traits that need to be amplified right now. 100%.
Yes. Thank you for that. And Candace, I'm going to introduce you in just 1 second. I'm going to bring you all in. So I'm going to take a quick pause and I'm going to say, I'd like to welcome Candace Rice. Candace, I'll go ahead and introduce you. For those of you who don't know, this is Candace Rice. And if you want to unmute yourself, I'll just let you take the floor and then I'll pull it back to you.
Sorry, my bad. Hi, y'all.
Hey, Candace.
Hi, Candace.
Hey.
So Candace, for those of you who don't know, you might have seen her on television. She's on a number of shows. She has been on Washed, Wade's World, MTV's Floribama. She's a celebrity influencer. She also is a business owner, has several of her own companies, and is really into things that are good for you, and has a real calling and a passion as an entrepreneur. So we're going to bring her into the conversation, and she's actually, it's really timely. What I was just about to say, to moderate it all together and yes, take on this difficult challenge of giving sense to all of this, everything that everyone said tonight is really pulling out our heartstrings. And the truth is, when COVID hit us and this pandemic began, the world slowed down so that all of us could catch up. Because now, instead of being, rushed day to day and here to there, we've had time to take it all in. And now we're craving what's true. We don't want the fake news. We don't want stories. We want to know what's real, and we want to know what to do, and we want to know how to activate ourselves and become a culture of people who can care, which is one of the reasons why we started this platform. We're not paid. We are not overproduced. These are real experts having real conversations. And, welcoming you to Words of Wisdom is really, it's about respect. And it's about equity, and it's about, more specifically, racial equality. When we formed this panel, we wanted to make sure that everyone was represented. We wanted to make sure that we had a nice mix so that everyone could come onto this call and find something to believe in, because there was someone who felt like you in front of you on your screen. And, to achieve the best and most fair results so that we all can prosper. But to get there, we've got to tune in. We've got to be proactive, and we have to engage in conversations like this that aren't always easy, but are crucially important. And the most important thing of all is that we get real. And when I had the opportunity to speak with Candace earlier this week, one of the things we talked about was the new normal and the ability now as influencers to remove the smoke and mirrors, to remove the glitz and glam of Hollywood, and to be forced to create your own narrative, to be forced to be up close and personal with your fans like never before. And I was just wondering, Candace, if you could kind of kick us off. And we're not digressing, we're going to come back to this topic, but I think it's important that we hear from some of the influencers, and how are you reacting to this news, number one? What kind of feedback have you been getting from your fans? But more importantly, just how are you adjusting to the new normal, and, and what happens next? And how do we digest all of this?
So myself personally, as a content creator, because I'm not just a part of the show and, not just an entrepreneur. In order for me to be able to generate income in the midst of everything that's going on, I have to create content as a marketing strategy, which is what a lot of influencers are doing. They're having to, because there's been such a hold on all of the other projects that we get, and even like brand deals and things like that. There's been such a dry up of that, with everybody trying to preserve their money because we don't know where things are going to go. A lot of content creators are having to create their own content to be able to just drive people to their page, drive sales, so forth and so on. And so it's been refreshing to be able to focus more on my content. But the only thing that is more difficult, I think, for more of the younger influencers is having to do all of this and being in a space by yourself. It's like we are glued to our phones, but we do value relationships. We do value being able to go out, especially those that are like, in their 20s. And so it's been a big adjustment having to navigate being at home and not having interpersonal relationships. But it's been wonderful because now your fans can get to know you more. And I use Cardi B as such a great example because so many people relate to her, and she's always had like this kind of like this sister vibe with her fans, and it's caused all of us to kind of adopt that same thing, even though for her, I feel like it's unintentional. That's just her personality. But it's like we've been able to adopt that by going live. Like live streaming is the new standard. So I think it's forced a lot of us to accept a new way of engaging with people that support us, like people that support my YouTube, support my Instagram, and I can now show them love and not even know them. And I think it's beautiful.
And how do you suggest that maybe, with your influencer status, that you can almost create a larger change than just sort of sharing your own self-activation, but really pull people in to have a greater sense of community? I mean, is that a possibility in today's world? Because so many times, what we're still seeing is, everybody's talking about their own stuff and they're not taking time to pause and really aggressively band together, in a good cohesive way. One of the things, and before you answer, what this reminds me of is a couple of weeks ago when the pandemic started and we were isolated in our homes, P. Diddy did this thing, the state of emergency, and got, some experts together and had a panel. And the thing that struck me about that was it was a bunch of people complaining, a bunch of people venting their opinions and not really giving enough of a formative conceptual background. So what do you do? How do you react to it? How do you respond? So Candace, do you think there is a call to action to influencers such as yourself to really take a different stance?
Well, what I've been doing with my own personal fans is creating funny content in addition to creating content that uplifts and inspires versus complaining. I feel like we are still if you are in this country and have a cell phone and have access to the internet, you are in a better position than people who are in other countries that do not have access to internet, that do not have an iPhone. So the fact that you're able to get on Netflix or get on YouTube and find content and not have to worry about the government blocking content and all of those other things that people in other countries have to deal with, I think it's a blessing. So I use that perspective and communicate that with people. And I use comedy. Like everybody right now is loving to laugh. TikTok is like where people are going to laugh right now. So I put my focus into TikTok. I put out like 2 TikToks a day. And I use more of comedy to be able to allow people to just kind of like, that's the best response I think to it. Cause there's nothing that we can do. We can't go, a lot of us can't go to work. We can't go out with friends. The best we can do is hop on the phone and hop on a Zoom. So I think that is the best response is gratitude for where we are. Like community service has really helped keep me personally in a happier place to be able to have a better influence on the people that follow me. So after doing community service every week and seeing that there are people having to deal with this that don't have a home, I think gratitude is the only way to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Would you say kind of events of the more recent days, does it cause you to kind of be woken up and to say, wow, there's a lot of things, a lot of work that still needs to be done in the world? Oh yeah, most definitely. It's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think that in this time that we're taking to think about the things that's going on in the world, and as we are consuming more content, because I think that more people are at home consuming things, I think that I think that we're in a space where we're seeing things for what they are, and we're taking it in, and we're either making a decision to believe it or not. And there's been a lot of people that's been saying a lot of what we're going through is set up from the government and all this other craziness. So I just think that as we're consuming the news and all of that other stuff, which I have a whole separate opinion about the news and the media, but I think that we're in a place where we're realizing what's happening. We're seeing how nature's behaving, how the air is behaving here in LA, how the world is transitioning as, people who we are the visitors of this planet are having to be forced to stay inside. Yeah, so at the end of it all, you really have to realize that change is inevitable. And just like you've had to change and adjust and decide what's going to be the new normal, you also have to change how you react to news. And you have to change the core beliefs within yourself that you're powerless and helpless. I did see a question in the chat. Somebody asked, well, that's great if you're a celebrity or an influencer, but what about those of us who don't have fans, right? You still have a voice. And never underestimate the power of one voice. A very simple example that I can give that maybe you may not be aware of. I'm sure many of you on the call have heard of a foundation called the Make-A-Wish Foundation. The Make-A-Wish Foundation was started by one policeman who had a beautiful relationship with a child who was dying of cancer. And that one person created a vision that was larger than himself that has helped so many people. And that's just one example. You know, there's so many people who are doing different things. And it all begins with when you see something you don't like in the world, we have to adopt some of the foundational principles from Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, we have to have a nonviolent resistance, and we have to understand how to creatively embrace things from an attitude of this is how we're going to work together to have one voice. And we have to accept change in a different way. Rather than be reactive, we have to learn to respond, and we have to embrace a different type of change. And maybe Alyssa, you could speak a little about, you know, how do we embrace change in times of uncertainty?
Well, we're not all experts at doing that gracefully, and some things really just cut to the bone. So I think what I like to talk about is that most things come down to love or fear. And I think that reacting is a fear-based thing and responding is a love-based thing. So there's a lot of triggering events in the media right now. There's real world things that are happening which are just untenably awful. That's just true. I mean, there are behaviors out there that are uncharacteristically hostile. So it could be the easiest thing in the world to slip into a place of absolute reactivity that is hostile and angry and matches the level of fear that we're observing in the world. But I do think our accountability and our integrity is tied directly to our ability to love and our ability to take action. Now, some people might think, well, that's great, love. Like, what does love look like in the world when all these terrible things are happening and people are dying? Like, love's irrelevant. Love's just a privileged word. I actually think that love, integrity, and accountability are all friends holding hands. And in the absence of those pieces, it's very difficult to change. Unless we tell the truth, change will never follow. If we're not willing to peer behind the curtain and call BS, then we're going to be stuck exactly where we've been. So to be forward moving and to really know that change is a process, we each have to step into the current of newness, taking the strengths we've learned in the past, but innovating with resilience as we move towards the future. And sometimes that feels impossible when you feel like your heart is broken. When you feel like your heart is broken and you can't make sense of the world and you don't want to get out of bed, the notion of change making seems like a mile away. But even the smallest steps can create a sense of hope in us and a sense of agency and a sense of community that shifts everything. Like, even if it's a dialogue with people who are informed and conscious and well-intentioned, that's a seed that gets planted. So change doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but our thoughts and our emotional content definitely influence our behavior. And if we are constantly in a state of fear, our behavior is going to be a lot more reactive. If we can get centered emotionally ourselves, our behavior is going to serve us and others around us a lot more. I really believe that.
Well, certainly powerful stuff. You know, those are some of the same questions that we get a lot, you know, when there's all this turmoil in the world around us and, you know, we're still trying to be a good person to ourselves and we're still trying to tender the things within us that we need as human beings. We talk about craving connection and needing more than ever to give meaning to our life. And with the changing times, there's all of these new rules of engagement, so to speak, right? So we have new ways of meeting people virtually online. We have relationships that have been put on hold. And so there's all sorts of unrest, even in our own personal lives, for things that are within our own homes and where we are safe. Yeah. And when we think about that, you know, we have our expert, Dr. Ish, on the line to kind of ease us into gracefully, you know, what are some of the new rules in this time for understanding social distancing, for creating common ground in new relationships? I mean, do your standard 3-date rules apply? And even though it's a sensitive issue, I think it's really important because one of the things that happens in times like this is we have the need for deeper connections because there is so much unrest. And so many times we form relationships with people because we're complaining about the same things. But if we know anything about relationships, if you're upset about things that are happening, you know, in other states, or you're upset about things that are happening at your job, and you form a relationship with another individual, and the two of you are just complaining about all the things you don't like, that's not really a relationship. That's commiseration. And so as we adjust Dr. Ish to the new normal, you know, what are some of the new rules, and what can we do in times like this to still tender our hearts?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because, you know, obviously things have changed, and, you know, Alyssa, you said it, you know, what's driving that change? What's motivating that change as this world has drastically changed around us in the last 2 months? People don't, right? Generally, we stay the same, right? That is to say, the things that we need and we want stay the same. We all have this need to be important to somebody in our lives. We all have this need to feel like we're significant. We've all got this need to feel like we have a connection with another human being who gets us and who we get. We all feel like we need to have this sense of certainty that when I lay my head on the pillow tonight, tomorrow morning, I'm going to wake up and things are going to be okay. Right? That's one of the things that's driving so many folks nuts, because that's been stripped away from us, right? We like uncertainty, we like surprise, but we like the surprises that are pleasant. And the surprises we've been getting over the last couple of months aren't very pleasant at all. And so, yeah, we still need to make that connection. And it's difficult, but it's not a mission impossible, right? So when you look, you always find, and love is no different. And so it's just, we have to look in a little bit different way. So now we're being forced to do it in a much more patient way than before, right? Online dating is up, hangouts and hookups are down. It's just what it is. That's the change. That's the change. And now we just got to deal with it. And so, you know, we're being forced to take it a lot slower than we used to, right? It's a weird thing that's happening when people are kind of looking to reach out and connect online, is people are having to have these weird things that we call conversations. When you actually have to talk to somebody and you have to share information about yourself, and then you exchange information so that you can both make an informed decision before you actually decide if you want to hang out and hook up. It's weird, but it's what we're having to do now, right?
That could be dangerous, though.
Say again?
That could be dangerous, because a lot of people wear faces online, and it's going to be a lot of catfishes once this is all over with.
Oh, Candace, there's going to be hundreds and thousands of catfishes, and it is already going on. So those rules of engagement are more important now more than ever, right? What do you do to keep yourself safe when that's all going on, right? One of the main things you can do is be very selective about what it is you're sharing in your life, right? Mm-hmm. You know, where do you live? Well, I live on the north side of town. That's about as much information as I'm comfortable giving you right now. Or you live in a home, you live in an apartment. You know what? I live in an apartment in a commune surrounded by people. Why you want to know, right? So you got
and guard dogs.
And cut your location off. Cut your location off on Snap or wherever you're talking at. They can see you.
You got to be very careful about, and you got to be very careful.
Don't talk to people.
Right.
That's right.
Or that. Don't talk.
Right.
I'll meet up with you after social distancing is over.
Well, Dr. Ish, let's say you meet someone on social distancing, and you know you're quarantined in your own places, and you know, respectively, and then you know you've quarantined, and now we're allowed out in the community. Do you still need to wait, or because you've been talking consistently, you know, should you still wait the 3 days before you know, formalize the relationship? Or, you know, does breakfast, lunch, and dinner count as 3 dates?
I'm sorry.
You said last time that you could do it whenever you wanted to do it. That's what I heard him say. Like, it didn't matter.
And Shatana, you heard correctly. We're grown. We're grown folks. We can make grown folks decisions, and we can live with those grown folks' consequences. And so you've got to do the thing that comes natural, but you got to be smart, right? If you're female, I got 5 sisters. I don't want to hear nothing about no boyfriend, no new dude coming back to your place the first time you ever met. That's just not smart. That's just not going to happen, right? You're going to meet on neutral grounds. I'm going to see if the thing that I thought I knew over phone conversations and virtual conversations actually checks out in real life, and if I get the same vibe, then I'm going to proceed accordingly. If I don't, we're going to call it, and I'm going to jump in my Uber and I'm out. So you just got to be smart about those things, right? You always, as a female, you absolutely positively want at least one girlfriend to know where you're supposed to be,
Where
who
you
you're
at
supposed to
all
be with,
times, Dr. is preaching.
right? And what time you're supposed to be home. That girlfriend, if she's a true blue girlfriend, she needs to call you 1 hour into this date and be like,
Ain't
hey,
that
girl,
right,
I'm
best
just
friend?
checking in.
Code word
Every-
panda.
Ain't that right,
Whatever
Tamra?
that code word is. You know?
Yeah, I always
I
say
can't
code
do
word
anything,
panda.
Shatana.
Right.
I be
Now,
like,
listen, if
where
the code
are
word
you?
is
What they
panda,
look like? Snap a picture when he not looking.
Right.
Did he turn to
Right.
the side? What's his
All
license
that.
plate look like?
And so, Tana, you know what? That's so. If the code word is panda, when the girlfriend calls and you pick up, she's like, "Hey, girl, you know what? I just ordered the panda chicken, whatever that is."
Yeah.
But the other
See,
thing
Tamra,
is,
I am not crazy.
Right,
Oh my,
so-
thank you, Dr.
Wants to know
So, Tana-
everything.
I'm
And
like,
guess
how
what?
tall
And
is
here's
he
the
really
other
as
thing you
tall?
gotta-
Is he really that tall? Do he have on blue? Is his hair, what is it, a fade? Is it braids? Like, did you take your car or Uber? You're Tamra
Now,
Simmons. Don't even
and
go. Like, wait.
Here's the thing I would do. I would do, because every guy's there for his own reason, right? And sometimes our intentions are real and genuine, and sometimes our intentions are highly selfish, right? And so what a guy wants you to know, a guy who's really there for the right reasons, he wants you to know this immediately. He wants you to know that he's different from the other 5 guys you were thinking about having this date with on this Friday. So the thing that he's going to do is he's going to address the elephant in the room for you. And he's going to say, hey, you know what? This is our first date. Shouldn't there be some girlfriend calling you right about now to double check and make sure I'm not crazy? You know what I mean?
He's
Do you
not
wanna-
you or your son. He don't know to do that.
Right? Exactly. Hey, do you not want to take a picture of me and send it to somebody so they know I'm not some crazy? Or he can help you address those.
I've never
big,
had a guy
nasty
ask
elephants
that.
in the room.
Exactly.
Right?
That's
Dr.
not
Ish, can we
real,
clone you?
Candace. It's not
I
real.
think me and
never had
Alyssa
nobody
could come
ask.
together and clone you. Dr. Ish, I need a sample of your DNA, what school you went to. We need to talk. You know what? You need to teach a class.
That's why he's on TV. This is
We should teach a class. We should absolutely teach a class. But you know what?
Teach a class. You know, you're talking to me. You realize I'm already thinking about the class we're gonna teach,
We
right?
got to do it.
Because like guys be like sending like they don't even ask for dates anymore. I'm like, you messed up last week when you text me if I wanted to chill at the casa. You asked me if I was hungry. I'm a publicist. I'm tired. There's drama going on in the world. You don't know if my feet hurt. You just dive right on in. You block.
Well, do you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the
He's
basics.
not that into you.
Even better.
Oh, my God.
Here's a lesson for you. Here's some real words of wisdom. If you're listening, turn your speakers up. There is something called the economics of dating. It's sort of my own philosophy. If you want to increase your demand, you've got to decrease your supply. Because if you're like BOGO, buy one, get one, or it's half off at Target and you can just go there and get it whenever you want to, that's not going to have a whole lot of value, right? So,
And then Louisa,
Super smart.
she said basically don't hand it out like hotcakes. Be very
That's right.
selective of who. Well,
If you
and
want
now,
your
so
great-
Dr. Ish said you could give it to whoever you wanted as long as the vibe was right.
well,
Or
it's
this
a
is a great time.
What I'm saying is all guys are not as stupid as you think, and all guys are not lacking
The devil's
intuition
busy. It's a
as
got
we
to be the
think,
free.
right? And so, guys, we like to be in love too. We like to, we like dating too. We like to feel good too, and we want to know that we're wanted also. And so, while you're trying to check out the vibe, he's also feeling out the vibe. And again, it's a relationship. It's a living, breathing thing. And it's like any living, breathing thing. There are milestones that are going to be met at a time that's appropriate and at a time that feels normal for both of you. And if those things don't happen, okay, you know what? We meet, great. It's great. One of those milestones is the first kiss, right? You know what? This is feeling a little awkward for me, but one person's into it, so maybe the kiss doesn't happen. One of the things, another milestone is the first time you have sex, whether it's tonight, whether it's next week, whether it's 3 weeks, whether it's 3 months, it needs to feel right for both of you. But if it feels right and things are amazing and, oh my God, I've never had this kind of fun on a first date before. I don't know what it is about you. You know what? I don't know what it is about you either. But then somebody pulls back because, oh no, I got this rule in the back of my mind that says I can't have sex with you for another 29 days because that's the only way to tell if you're, now he knows you're not being genuine because now you're not being true to your feelings. And if you're not going to be true to yourself, then what are the chances you're going to be being true to me? And so now things are getting off on unequal footing. And now you're heading down a path that probably doesn't need to be there. And so you've got to make that own call. You've got to understand. Here's the thing that I want every single female out there who's going to go on a first date in the next 3 months to understand. There is absolutely, positively nothing you can say, absolutely, positively nothing you can do that is going to scare your Mr. right away.
Yes.
If he is there for you, you can't be crazy enough, you can't be loud enough, you can't be whatever enough that's going to send him running out the door, because he's there for you and you're exactly what he's looking for. He wants to see the real thing. He doesn't want to meet the field rep. He wants to see you, and he wants all of it. So I can make a decision. Yes, she is in fact who I thought she was. She is as bananas and nuts and crazy as I thought, and I dig all of it. Give me more. There's nothing you can say. There's nothing you can do. He's there for you. And the quicker you find that out, the quicker you can both stop wasting each other's time.
Well, that's
Yes. Oh, sorry, Louisa.
Oh, go ahead.
You want to go?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, that was just in reference to what you said, doctor, because like I had went on a date with a guy, and you know was trying to happen the first date, and I felt bad about it. He wanted to marry me, like be with me forever. And I was like, really? And then, you know, I've held out for people and they didn't like me. So I think that that's very interesting, because I think that there's a rule that's like these guidelines to what a woman of value does.
Right.
And, you know, I've just noticed from life experiences that it doesn't always work that way. Like, it's just in connection. So I'm very happy to hear you say that, because, you know, I just thought I was a thought.
Well, what happens is,
but Candace, here's the thing. Let me respond. Candace, here's the thing, right? When you're talking about there are things that a woman of value does and there are things that a woman of value doesn't do, if he's seeing you, right? If he's seeing all of who you are, then he knows you have value. And he knows that that's something he needs to treat accordingly. And so that's why it's so important to not hold any of you back, right? Oh, I'm not going to say this. He might not like it. Oh, you know, people generally think I'm weird if I, you know, tell him how much I like that. Don't hold any of that back, right? You need him to make an informed decision about you as quickly as possible. So you can know whether you have to say the next important word in dating or not, which is next, right? Is he the guy? Is he not? Let me give him all the information and as succinct a package as possible so you can make a decision. And oh, by the way, you're also making a decision about him. Now, the guy who wanted to marry you, I get it, but don't do that part. not on the first date.
well, I think that's what it comes down to, is that, you know, there's research in psychology and neuroscience and behavioral science that talks about how regret has this impact on your life, and that money and relationships are arguably the two issues that consume us the most. And when we think about, you know, our emotional and our mental resources and how it affects our behavior, you know, we have to look at how can we be emotionally strong so that no matter what someone else thinks of us in a relationship, that you hold your ground and that you still believe that you have value. Because when you're thinking about how the world has changed, you believing in yourself and having your own value is one of the best gifts that you can give to yourself. Because whether someone thinks you're a 5 or whether someone wants to marry you or someone doesn't want to marry you, ultimately, when someone, you know, can't recognize the value in you, it's because maybe you weren't equally matched, or maybe they didn't recognize the value in themselves. And so that's what made it so difficult. And so that all comes down to, you know, learning how to bounce back when someone says something about you that you don't like, and learning how to have self-resilience and learning how to rely on yourself and really understand that regardless of what someone thinks about you, you can still become a stronger, more beautiful, more whole version of yourself, regardless of what's going on around you. And maybe, Alyssa, you want to speak to that about, you know, how do you respond in situations where, you know, someone's view is different than yours, and build that inner love of yourself?
Well, I think that this is a time where we actually can work to refine our intuition. I think that we talk a lot about what other people think about us, and sometimes we ignore that nagging little voice inside, which tells us that something is out of alignment with our integrity. So I actually really like the notion of using this time to refine our dialogue with ourselves. You know, instead of looking out to the world and saying, what are people thinking of me? How am I being evaluated? What is my currency in the world? I think it's really interesting during this pause to say, what do I think of myself? How much am I willing to stand behind who I am and my views and my values? Where can I hold myself accountable for growth? And where can I be proud of the person I am and am becoming? You know, there's always going to be people who have different opinions, and different opinions aren't problematic. When people are cruel and punishing and lack compassion, one has to ask themselves why they stay in dialogue with those individuals. I think that we are often the measure of the people closest to us, and we have a choice about who we allow into our lives. Now, certainly we're being impacted all the time by acts that are egregious, that are coming from outside of people we don't know, but how we respond to them is utterly ours. I think it's really a time to be emotionally agile and to know that there's going to be some really difficult things coming down the pike, but to trust that we have the grit and the grace to not only show up for ourselves, but to show up for those around us who are in need. I think that being of service during this time is absolutely a bare minimum requirement for anybody who is paying attention. As Shaitana said, like, honestly, and maybe this is going to come off as sanctimonious and self-righteous, but I'm kind of tired of the nonsense. Like, I'm really actually like up to here. You know,
Yeah,
I don't
if we
really
get
want to
tired,
hear.
it's not gonna stop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's where change happens.
Yeah,
Love
that's
and
why
happiness
I was
is not
saying
gonna go anywhere.
I was
Yep.
very emotional today because it's just like it. I don't know how much has to keep on happening for us to like stand up and, you know, people are in my inbox, like on Facebook, on Instagram. People are like reposting some of the things that I have wrote, especially like what the post I wrote about being a Black mother and having a Black son, you know, because that hits home, you know, for me. And even though I'm a Black woman too, and, you know, Sandra Bland, we know what happened to her. So it's not affecting just Black men, but it's affecting Black women as well. And then I see my species, like my son, are they going to be around anymore? Like that's the whole thing. And so I just get emotional, and then I feel compelled to do something to make a change because of, you know, of course, everyone knows I did survive in R. Kelly. And so that made such a huge impact. So you can only understand the weight that I feel is on my shoulders just from doing that to now, like, transitioning to this. And Shaitana and I have been going back and forth for like the past 24 hours and put a lot of things together, and that you guys will see coming forward. But I feel like I can't just sit back and post. I have what, 20,000 followers. I don't care if I have one follower. I don't care if I have 2 followers. Like, my voice needs to be heard, and how I feel needs to be heard. And I feel like that's going to compel someone else to want to get up and, like Alyssa said, and make a change. And I want to use the influence that I have in a good, impactful way. I don't want to use it because I want likes and I want an endorsement and everything else. I don't care anything about that. Shaitana will tell you, like, she'll tell me, like, you gotta post today. You gotta post today. And I'm like, I don't want to post. But when it's something like yesterday, I didn't post about Ahmaud because I'm still dealing with Nathaniel Woods and his family and those that have been affected by that. I'm not over that yet. So how can I post about something else? Like, it's just, I'll get really emotional.
And then it's me on the back end encouraging her to go to war, because a lot of people consider war as violence. But let's just be realistic. If we don't go to war on this culture of discriminative behavior, of racism, of injustice, if we don't go to war against that, you don't stand for something, you're nothing. Nothing.
100%.
To die for something. And I know that sounds extreme, right? But the truth is like, so Tamra just said something very significant. I think everybody needs to realize what she said. She said, you know, my platform has this many people. Well, here's the thing. There's people with bigger platforms. All of us have some type of platform, some kind of following, 6 degrees of separation. Everybody with a platform needs to be saying it's unacceptable. Everybody with a platform needs to be saying, hey, Tamra, hey, Shaitana, we heard y'all say y'all was about to do something. What's up? Want me to call you? Or you can even be proper. Send me an email. I love emails. But the truth is, everybody needs to be like, what can we do? What does it look like to change it? And here's my expertise, and here's my platform, where what's yours and what's yours and what's yours. Because the truth is, if we don't go to war against this thing, then that speaks volumes about who you are, which is when I got back on, Alyssa was saying, the kind of people you're around that you deal with, your righteous friends, your good friends, your bad friends, that's a reflection of you. Something about you is drawn to that in a person. So if you're not going to stand up for something and you're just going to sit by the wayside and go along with it, that speaks about who you are. And a lot of us have self-worth issues because we don't stand for anything. And there's nothing that sparks anything within you. You think you can just live a life for yourself, but that's not true. You want to be fulfilled in life, get something to fight for. Get somebody to fight for. Get someone to help. Get somebody to love the hell out of, and it will completely pull you out of a lot of dark places because you have purpose in other people and helping and in humanity. And all the time, Tamra's right. Me nor Tamra care about a camera, an endorsement, money. We make that. We're not worried about none of those things. We have skill sets, okay? Real ones.
Well, my purpose is for other people.
You got to call us. You need us. But you think we don't have to take time out of the day. Truly, my caseload is 40 plus on an easy day, right? But both of us took time yesterday. We literally put everything down yesterday in real life. Me and Tamra put everything down that we had and said, now what? Because it's not going away.
Well, what happens is, yeah, and that's so important, Shatana, because what happens is in society, greed and worry and desire, take precedence over really what needs to happen. And although we have to really look at our pervasive attitudes that make it difficult, to get rid of this epidemic of greed. Because when we look at what's happening in the world today, it was the greed for power. It was the greed to, I have a gun and I know how to take the law into my own hands. And I'm so greedy, I don't have to give someone the benefit of the doubt or the human rights that we have, or even innocent till proven guilty. I can take that greed and use my own power for my own desire and do what the heck I want to do. And that's the real evil here. And so when you think about the epidemic of greed that has left so many people in the dust, you really have to emphasize the value of being at peace, even in times of war, wealthy in spirit, wealthy in knowledge, and the ability to understand how the change occurs and what conversations you have to change the narrative and change the dialogue and actually change the eventual outcome. And so many times right now, all of these unforeseen forces in the world, they're ruining our lives really, because they're consuming us with the egregious wrongs that are happening in the world. And what you really have to do is make sure that when you're on your soapbox and when you're on your platform and when you are reaching out to people, that you really have the right issues for success and ambition for having the right outcome occur. And so many times what happens is our own desire for greed and our own desire to be heard more intently than actual making sure people know what they are supposed to do. There's lots of how to do it yourself guides. You can tell everybody in the world what to do, but until you tell them how to do it and how to make the change, you're stuck in that vicious cycle of greed, worry, and desire that never ends. Desire for a better life, desire for opportunity, desire for equality. And greed is actually the hardest illness to treat. And maybe Dr. Ish can speak about that, because greed, it's its own enemy in itself. And it also ties into a whole plethora of other types of, issues in life. So do you want to speak a little bit about greed, Dr. Ish?
Yeah, greed it's a tricky word, right? Because what really is it? What are we talking about? Are we talking about the want of things? And I don't have any problem with wanting things. I like things. I like nice houses. I like nice cars. I like nice clothes. We all should. And I don't think there's anything wrong in wanting things. But I think when we talk about greed, the problem with greed is the reality that we're bringing to the table, right? If my reality is that I live in an abundant universe and there's more than enough for me and you and you and you, then I never have to be greedy. But if my mentality is, if my reality is, if life has taught me that we live in a world of limited resources, and the more you have, then the less I have, well, then now that's where greed comes in, because I need to get all of mine first, and then you can have whatever's left. And so it's so I think my thing with, as being a psychiatrist, I'm always trying to understand, well, what is it that people are trying to do, right? What problem are they trying to solve? Why do I want these things? Why do I want money? Why do I want power? Why do I want a new Porsche? Why do I want a bigger house? Why do I want a beautiful lover in my bed? Well, I want these things because of the way I think they're going to make me feel. I think they're going to make me feel better.
I
It's going
think
to
you're
make me.
making a lot of sense, Dr. Ish, because I think that's where a lot of these issues that we're having, racism and all that. Why do you want power? Because I'm superior. And if I think in my head it's logical that if they get some of this, then I lose something from it. Well,
Right.
there's a root. That's the root of a lot of things. I think.
Right,
Dr.
Shatana.
Ish, you're always right.
Well,
Look, and the thing of it is, so if that's the case, right, Shatana, so take that argument, so spin that, elevate, educate, right? Take that one step further. And so if that's the case, if the more you get, the less I have, now I have a super duper vested interest in making sure that you don't have any. Because the greatest drive we all have is that drive for self-preservation. And if you having some things, whether it's power, whether it's money, whether it's sway, whether it's influence, is going to mean that I have less of those things. Well, that can't happen. And I need to make sure I do everything I can to keep you from having it. And so, yeah, it's why the reason we want these things. How's it going to make me feel? I want to feel happy when I have the beautiful lover in my bed. I'm going to feel strong and powerful when I'm driving my sports car. I'm going to feel significant when I roll home and everybody sees this big house on the hill. And so we've really, it always got to go back to that. And the thing that we've really got to understand, and this is an abundant world, this is an abundant universe, and everything and anything you could possibly want, it is there 1,000-fold. You can't dream of enough that won't come to you. It is here. It has always been here, and it will always be here, just as your soul and your spirit has always been here, will always be here. It is eternal. And it's always going to be new things we want. They're always going to be the next thing. Once you get the Ferrari, you're going to want a Bugatti. Once you get the house on 5 acres, you're going to want another house on 10. And so that's what we're here to do.
But once I get the one good husband, I'm going to want.
well,
You're going to
once
want more years with that one good husband.
you're always going to want something more. Very, very valuable advice
I'm
because
not upgrading, Dr. Ish. I need you to support me right now. I need support from you guys.
well, you know what happens is that certain types of greed and power, they operate on similar principles. And what happens is, greed and power, they activate the pleasure pathways. And so that's why you really have to be careful of what you're fighting for. Think of like the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, right? Or Wall Street Scammers, right? So if Wall Street scammers, swindle or break the law, or anybody who commits a crime, they break the law to get something else that's a reward, whether it's an extra $1 million or it's the satisfaction of having power, taking the law into your own hands. Once you have that power and that pleasure pathway activated by that power, even this applies to addiction too, at a certain point, enough is never going to be enough. And then you continually have to keep raising your stakes to get that same level of reward. And so what happens is you really have to be careful when you're talking about fighting for justice and doing what's right, because if you're fighting for justice, then that's always about the battle. And so you have to be really careful how you frame it, because you really have to change the narrative in your head to make sure that you're fighting for equality, and that equality is going to be the end result, or it's awareness, or it's inclusion, or it's compassion, or whatever the end.
You're fighting for, basically.
You have to
And
know
hold yourself accountable too. Make sure that your behavior lines up with your cause.
Yeah.
Like there's no sense in having this cause.
Yeah. I teach my son that all the time. When fighting monsters, it's important to never become one. So if we change the narrative, and there was 2 African-American men who shot a white kid, there's no hero here. Or if we go and burn down that house, there's not a hero in that situation. We haven't resolved anything. We've actually burned down our own house, because the way to win or change any situation is to change the person's heart. And I teach my son it all the time. Like, someone's bullying you, you can't go back and bully them too, or get back, because when fighting monsters, it's important to never become one. Mm-hmm. So the best thing,
love or fear.
If you absorb that hate and what they're spewing out, then you're no better than them. So how do you live a different way? And I think that speaks to what Louisa was saying. You gotta figure out, what am I fighting for? Well, I'm fighting because the culture needs to change. Well, why does it need to change? For the betterment of everybody, because that makes sense. But if you're just fighting because they did it to someone else, you're not going to stand behind it anyway. In order for you to stand behind a fight, or for it to truly validly be a fight, like it's not a fight if you just throwing punches in the wind. That's not a fight. You got to be hitting something, right? So logically, if we're talking about a fight, you have to know what you're fighting. You got to know your attacker. Because if not, you're just fighting yourself. So I get
And also,
it.
if you're fighting
so-
externally and then go home and yell at your kids or are unkind to your partner or have some self-annihilating behavior like not healthy eating or bad negative messaging to yourself, like there's still work to do. Like
Okay.
really the values I think have to be consistent. Like it all starts here. And the more healthy we become, the better equipped we become to affect change in the world. Like I really sincerely believe that. And that's why I feel like we have to hold ourselves accountable
Got it.
really
And,
all the
and
time.
the other thing, guys, is you got to be really, really careful and making sure that your outcome is always paramount in your mind, right? This is America. There's been a lot of folks who've been screwed over here, not just Black people. Women have been screwed over. Asian folks have been discriminated against, right? There's poor people in whatever shape or form. And so you got to, and so there's a lot of folks in this country who are just hurt and who are angry and who haven't felt like they've had a voice or had a platform, right? And when an opportunity comes where I can finally channel some of this rage into something constructive, you've got to be very careful not to get addicted to the fight and make sure that you're always addicted to your outcome, right?
Yeah.
Because as those chemicals start circulating around in your brain and that that adrenaline kicks in and that serotonin kicks in and the dopamine kicks in, it's very easy to get addicted to that because those emotions feel good. They make you feel strong and powerful and some even happy. And so you've got to be very careful. Don't get addicted to the fight. Get addicted to the outcome and always be able to pull back and gain perspective and make sure that we're on course for that outcome and we can adjust our course. And again, it's all right. Alyssa, you mentioned on it earlier. What are those things that are driving us to change? Well, the only two reasons we ever do something ever single in this life, and that is to avoid some pain over here or gain some pleasure over here, right? What are those things that are motivating you? And so one thing is going to be a much more powerful motivator than the other one. But, the difference between motivation and inspiration is motivation is pushing you towards something, but inspiration is that calling that's pulling you. So let that outcome pull you towards it. And that'll go a long way for you not getting addicted to just the fight and making sure you're addicted to the outcome and seeing it through.
Yeah, certainly so many things that we touched upon tonight, from what's real to what's fake to why is there such a delay in reaction and to what do we really have to do to kind of hone it all in and make sure we have a different outcome for ourselves. And it all comes down to safety in your relationships, safety to be able to run in your own neighborhood, free from fear of your life. Tamra, were there any questions in the chat that needed to be answered?
On Facebook, there was a question that said, how do we change the evil forces that be?
Oh, well, I think that in reference to what everybody was saying about, using our platforms to promote and, fighting, I feel like the one way to change those evil forces is to change people's thinking. And a lot of your thinking comes from how you were raised, where you come from, your environment that ultimately produced this type of thinking. And so I think that's the only way to change it. I think that the powerful narrative about what white privilege is and what it does and how it holds back a lot of minorities. I think that coming to the surface via social media in the last 5 years was something that was very powerful that allowed that allowed us to see why things were happening the way that they were, and allowing people of privilege to see how things were happening the way they were. And it opened a lot of people's eyes. And there has been change. There's been some change, not entirely. And so when we start looking at when we start looking at where we, and when I say we, I mean we as Black people are in the world and how we were raised. And then also when you start looking at, and the listen is not just Black people, all people, when it comes to hate and evil, you have to look at where they're coming from in their thinking. A lot of that has been taught. And so you figure out how to get the narrative of compassion and understanding that everybody doesn't start at the same starting point in life. And when you come to that understanding, which I feel like a lot of that happens through mental awareness therapy, I think that's the best way. That's the best way to do it. Evil is completely taught. I don't believe that people are. If you look at babies are not innately evil. So that's something that has to be changed through efforts to put out to put out that information, to allow people and to help people to understand that we're all the same in a lot of ways. We all started a little different, got a little bit different cultures, speak a different language. And so I think that's the best way.
Great advice. And I'd like to thank everybody for all of the information that we provided tonight. These are uncertain times, so it's really hard to always get our points across, but this is one of the reasons that we started Words of Wisdom, because we wanted to just open the dialogue and not have it be so scripted that we had to run off of a list, that we wanted to hear what people wanted to talk about. And I think still these conversations are so important. And so, to Candace, thank you for, giving us your time tonight, and to Alyssa, always the grounding force of resilience and calmness in this storm. So necessary. You can find Alyssa at Alyssa Gruber Wellness and Wellness NYC all over Instagram. There's just a lot of really good stuff. And Candace Renee Rice, obviously on Instagram, I am Candace. And Dr. Ish, well, everybody knows Dr. Ish, so you can find him everywhere. It's like Dr. Seuss. If you wish to wish for Ish, just make a wish on the Ish Wish dish. And Tamra, was there something that you wanted to add?
No, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Candace. I know you're busy creating content and making sure that the world smiles, because her posts always make you laugh or smile. So thank you for always doing that. And I go to your page, I'm like, I know Candace will make me laugh. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're like my therapy. So thank you for that, and thank you for your time. Alyssa, thank you as always. I love you. Like your like grace is just, I don't know.
Right?
Yeah, it's just like, I don't even know how to describe you. So thank you for always being so like eloquent and just, merciful. Like you teach us mercy. So thank you. And thank you, Dr. Ish, as always, for being available, open, helping us be able to date again. And being safe while doing so.
In these uncertain times, it is very difficult. And so, yeah, Dr. Ish, just a gratitude of thanks for your willingness to participate, because we just have to be able to talk about the love and the difficult times. Was there anything you wanted to add, Dr. Ish?
That's like Tamra, there's just a lot of emotion swirling around, and I think Candace touched on it, and Alyssa, you touched on it. In order for you to be able to treat me poorly, when we're talking about change, right, and change the way we think about each other, in order for you to be able to treat me poorly, there's certain things you have to honestly believe about me, right? There's a story you have about me. And if your story is that I'm not as smart as you, then you're going to treat me differently. If your story is that I don't have as much value as you, then you're going to treat me differently. If your story is that my children don't have as much value as your children, and these are stories that have been handed down to us throughout the wheels of time since we've been here in this country, right? And so the only way to change the way you feel about me is to change what you see when you see me. And so the question is, when you look at me, what do you see? Right? What do you see?
That's beautiful, and I think it's so important. So beautiful.
Right?
Thank you.
And so we've got to be vulnerable and let people see who we are. Right? All black guys are not athletes or thugs. That's not who we are. All Caucasian women are not Stepford wives at home. That's not who you are, right?
I am not.
Me either. Definitely not.
Not her.
Right? All black women are not loud and ratchet. My God, that's not who we are, right? And so it's just a matter of
Candace said I am.
It's just about letting we've got to not let the fear hold us back from showing the world who we are. No matter what else is happening, we all have the responsibility to show up each and every day and step fully into who we are, and let that voice be heard every single day. And that's the way you start to change it, because that's the only way people will start seeing you differently.
What a beautiful way to kind of frame it all out and create a level of understanding for words of wisdom that you really need to hear. I want to just close out with something that Dr. Ish just said. Dr. Ish said that you really have to have the ability to see others. And paramount to be able to see others is you have to be able to see yourself. And Tamra posted something the other day on her Instagram that I think is so timely and apropos. I even have a little bit of chills tonight as I'm about to read it. I want you on this call, whether you're listening tonight or whether you're listening 10 years from now when you're looking at pandemic archives. No one is coming to save you, to give you permission, to choose you, or to validate you. This has always been your job. You must love yourself so fiercely and fully that you have no choice but to be strong for yourself, to fight for yourself, to be yourself, and to build yourself. And for those of you on this call tonight, you took a chance. You gave us your Thursday night. And I'm certain if you play it back, you'll find something in here that's relative to you. Because before you show up for others, you have to show up for yourself, and you have to love yourself. And that's words of wisdom. Love yourself, show up for you, and be good to others. Thank you for joining Words of Wisdom. And again, thank all of our panelists for being with us. And we hope you'll keep tuning in. You know, we're learning as we go. And if you've got something you want to share, please email us at info@wordsofwisdom.global. And we just hope you'll stay with us as we figure it out, because we care about you and we hope that you care about you too. Good night. Thanks for joining.
Yes.
Guys.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you so much, Candace. Bye.
And it feels pretty good, living like I know I should. And it feels pretty nice, 'cause I wasn't living right. Yeah, I feel pretty clever, living on this side of never. Once upon a time, I never thought I could be living like I know I should. Just between you and me, there's so much hypocrisy, not many living like they say they are. Contradiction and confusion, people living in delusion, opposite of what they say.